Japan. I am JJWalsh, and today I am joined by Ashley Souther.
Hey, what's up, you guys?
So we are both in Hiroshima, and it's really fun to get together with Ashley. Now, Ashley, you have had such a colorful, very interesting career in Hiroshima and around the world. You are a peace activist. You are a peace educator, and you called yourself the wrestler of peace for a while. So, also pro wrestling mixed in there, right?
Yes. Yeah, it goes hand in hand. Pro wrestling and peace, of course, right?
Now we see the posters behind you. Maybe let's start with pro wrestling. How did that start? How did you get into pro wrestling? Was it like a dream as a kid? Did you watch it growing up?
I watched it growing up. I grew up in the South. So, it was always like a guilty pleasure, Kung Fu movies and pro wrestling. And I never thought it was something that I could actually do, because that's not something you think. You don't see that and say, like, I want to do that. At least I didn't. However, I came to it in a weird way in the West Bank town of Jenin. So, so I grew up watching wrestling like a lot of kids growing up in the South. There were three things that people talked about in the South when I was a young kid: hunting, truck and tractor pull, and professional wrestling. So, um, and so when I was actually teaching at the West Bank uh, town of Jenin at a university, I had done like regular, like quote unquote, real wrestling. And I wanted to make a club for the kids there because, like, in the West Bank in Palestine, it's under occupation and people don't have freedom. And so my idea was that they could just feel a little bit of freedom through sports and through the sport of professional wrestling. So I started a wrestling club at the university in Jenin. And then people kept telling me about this old man who did wrestling in the refugee camp in Jenin. And I just kept hearing from people, because they associated like wrestling with this old man that lived in this refugee camp. So I was like, I got to go see him, because I'm kind of a jump in kind of a guy. So I went to the refugee camp in Jenin, and I met this old guy named Haj Diab. And he actually didn't do wrestling, he did professional wrestling. And I didn't realize they associated the two. They couldn't tell the difference. For them, like, wrestling was wrestling. And this guy, Haj Diab, he had a completely handmade ring. Like, it was like dusty, rusty, like thrown together patchwork ring in a rinky dink. You go up these crumbly concrete stairs into a really stanky gym. And so it was just perfect. And I fell in love with it, from at first sight. And I told Haj Diab, I said, I said, I want to be, train me. And so I started training at that little gym in Jenin refugee camp with a bunch of other kids. And the really cool thing about Haj Diab was that he trained kids in wrestling, not like to become professional wrestlers or anything like that, but just to get them off the streets. Because at that time, kids in occupied West Bank, there was a lot of pitfalls. And, under occupation, Israeli army, kids, they're wild. They'll literally throw rocks at like Israeli jeeps and tanks coming through, the occupying army, and then, get into big trouble, get arrested or worse. So he wanted to like protect them from that. And he used wrestling as a way to protect them from that, and put their energies into a productive avenue. So I was so impressed with that, and that's where I actually started professional wrestling in Jenin, and then came and debuted in Japan. Sorry, it's a crazy story, but
That is a crazy story. Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of people wouldn't realize that we have pro wrestling circuit in Japan. We have our own Hiroshima pro wrestling circuit called Dove Pro Wrestling, right? Look at that cup you're drinking from. This is crazy. And so you were different kind of variations, you different
Mm.
costumes, right? Different names. How did you started this money character? Is it Glover?
Right. So that yes. So that's a funny thing. Actually, professional wrestling is huge here in Japan, and it's much more respected by normal people than it is in the United States. Which also made it really nice to wrestle in Japan because so I wrestled in different promotions. Thankfully, one of them was Kyushu Pro Desu. Yeah, and I was down there in Kyushu. And the cool thing about Kyushu Pro Desu, and I'm going to put them over here because they deserve it, is that each character in Kyushu Pro Wrestling is from a Meibutsu of Kyushu, right? So one of the famous things of Kyushu. So you have Aso-zan is a big mountain in Kyushu. You have the wrestler Aso-zan, who's a big dude. You have Mentaiko is like is a Meibutsu, a famous food in Kyushu.
That's spicy fish eggs for anyone who doesn't speak Japanese, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we have Mentai Kid, who's also a wrestler. And so actually a little known outside of Kyushu, but Thomas Glover was like a historical figure. He was Scottish. He became like a super rich by selling guns to samurai, as I understand it. And he built a mansion in Nagasaki called Glover Te. The Te means mansion. So Grabate is like a really famous spot in Nagasaki. So you have this Thomas Glover, this famous rich, white guy from history. So their great idea was to have me play this character Glover, and I would just be basically like a rich, white bad guy. So I'm one of those three things.
Oh man,
it was a lot
crazy.
of fun. Super fun. A lot of fun.
And then you had a different persona with big bull horns. Was that your most recent version?
Yeah. So I live and work here in Hiroshima, as do you, as we have since the 90s. So here people know me, so I can't really like pretend to be a bad guy because come on. So I was a good guy, or as we say, a face in the business here in Hiroshima, and I just went by my real name, Salza. So my gimmick was my gimmick wasn't a gimmick. It was just me going out there, just being hamming it up. But I always, for any wrestling fans, you'll know like the Road Warriors. They went out there with shoulder pads with spikes on them, and I loved that as a kid. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna have shoulder pads with bull horns on them. So that's what I did, and that was my thing coming out to the ring.
Wow. I saw one picture where you were hugging someone, you had the bull horns, and I was like, oh no, that looks dangerous. But so much of pro wrestling looks dangerous, right? But it's all rehearsed. You guys are really talented at like holding each other, throwing each other around. You said you did this to TV presenters. Like, how did they handle this? This is crazy.
Yeah, it's pro wrestling and pro wrestlers, I think they have like a special like heart, a space in the heart of Japanese people, because it's so visceral and so like but no, the thing is like you have to do things that make it look like you're killing someone or being killed while not actually doing so. That's really like the art and the that's the trick. So like looking like it make it hurt when it doesn't actually hurt that much. That's really like the trick of pro wrestling. But of course, at the end of the day, it does hurt, and you do get busted open. And in my last match, I got busted open like big time with a chair, and I was just covered in blood. So
Now you have always now when I had a great talk that I heard, a guy who went around the world trying to get landmines taken away, and he had such a serious job, and he lost both of his legs, and he still talked about the importance of sense of humor, the
mm.
importance of connecting with people in other ways. Was that kind of a way for you? Because it seems like you made such good friendships through pro wrestling, and you often did it hand in hand. Like here, you talk about like doing a peace talk, and then later on the weekend going and doing pro wrestling. Like how does it connect, or how do you like emotionally? Is it a release? Does it just help you to have that balance, or?
Mm. So, like, absolutely, on two levels. One was for me, uh, just to, like you said, have that release and go out and be able to pick someone up and throw them down, which you really can't do otherwise. Um, um, but I think, like, for me, also, like, on a deeper level, um, professional wrestling is all about, like, you're telling a story. And it's a story of confrontation. It's a story of two forces come together. And that's really its appeal, is that people, I think, even if they're not like into like sports and rugby and stuff like that, they realize that there's an aspect of life that is struggle between opposing forces. Struggle with gravity, struggle between plants for sunlight. It's that nature is something that I think that on a deep level we can all relate to, and especially people who are part of downtrodden or oppressed minorities. You know, because in a typical professional wrestling match, you can immediately tell who the good guy and the bad guy is, because throughout 90% of the match, the good guy is getting his butt kicked. And the bad guy is doing every dirty trick in the book and getting away with it. Therefore, yeah, like all the people are getting upset. But in the end, the good guy, um, beyond all odds, raises up in righteous indignity and fury and somehow defeats all odds to beat the bad guy. And that's something that like we can all identify with. But people like Palestinians who are living under occupation, I mean, that is just such a powerful message for them. And it's cathartic. It's a cathartic thing, to see that, yeah, we're getting our butts kicked now, but someday, justice will be served. It's very satisfying on a visceral level. So yeah, and I mean, I really love professional wrestling because it's the international language in a way. Whether that's one way that I made friends when I was in Gaza, in Palestine, is talking about wrestling, and people were like, "He must be all right." I've been in Malawi in Southern Africa, where you can't I couldn't understand the language and they couldn't understand mine, but I just did this, which is John Cena's "You Can't See Me," and they immediately got it. It was like it was much better than communicating by language.
Oh, that's amazing. And you've had some of your comrades from pro wrestling who've joined you, it looks like, in Peace Park for a protest.
Yeah. Chikano Kenshin. Yeah. Yeah, that was wild. That was like when worlds collide, you know. But for me, Hiroshima has always been a place of struggle, and for me, I've been very fortunate, and it's been very meaningful for me to wrestle in Hiroshima and be a Hiroshima based wrestler, um, because of the history of Hiroshima, and I definitely see the story of Hiroshima as being, you know, somehow congruent with that pro wrestling narrative of having gotten beaten down but not giving up, and eventually, you know, that belief that justice will be served, and and it's a defiance, you know, it's a defiance. Um, you know, it's pro wrestling. It's in your face. It's guttural. Um, it's unrepentant. You know, so I really identify with that. For me, pro wrestling and Hiroshima go hand in hand.
And you've married into a Japanese family. Your wife's parents were survivors, hibakusha survivors. So you're very closely connected and raising two kids of your own here in Hiroshima and being an educator. So you're also teaching is kind of like parenting, raising the next generation of people how to think about peace and things. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
but you think you'll live in Hiroshima forever? Is this home for you?
Um, no and yes. It is home for me. It is a home for me. I don't know about forever. I don't know about tomorrow. But I've adopted Hiroshima. I've adopted Hiroshima as a home for me, um, and I'm really lucky. You know, I'm really glad that I came to this place because I feel like Hiroshima has so much to offer the world. I feel like the quote unquote message of Hiroshima, and that I think is different depending on who you ask, but I think it has a lot to offer the world, and I think a lot that's necessary right now. So even if I physically leave Hiroshima, I'm never going to, you know, leave Hiroshima. Just how um, I'm not currently in Palestine, but I'm still connected to Gaza. I still feel Gaza is a home. Gaza is a home. Hiroshima will always be a home.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, a lot of people, I do tours at least once a week in Peace Park and around Hiroshima for visitors. And I think one of the most powerful things that I talk about when they see loads of kids coming around and viewing Peace Park, going to the Children's Monument,
Yeah.
placing their beautiful peace cranes that they've worked on at school. And I talk
Yeah.
about how all kids in Japan have peace education. And this is something my kids went through, and this is something that you've been really passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in teaching peace education at your school?
So, like, I I would be interested in comparing notes with you. Like my first exposure or my first meeting or first exposure to peace education in Hiroshima was that of surprise and also disdain. Like growing up in the States, you know, we didn't have peace education, and like the military was just generally seen in a positive light, as was everything that America did. So to come here and to first of all, you know, be in Hiroshima and be reminded of the atomic bombing, but also like at that time when I first came here in 1997, 1998, Hiroshima, the peace education here at that time was very strong. The teachers union was very strong, and they did their own thing. They didn't, you know, I think the audience probably knows of textbook issues, struggles with how history is taught. That's a big thing in our country and here as well. But at that time, Hiroshima did its own thing when it came to history and when it came to peace education, and it was really strong. And they were very clear about portraying militarism and the military and nationalism as a negative thing. And that was like a shock to me, you know? I remember we when I first came here teaching at a school, we went on a peace trip down to Okinawa. And we were supposed to go to Futenma Kichi, which is an American military base in the middle of Naha, I think. I'm not sure. In Okinawa. And I was thinking, oh, sweet, we're gonna get some hot dogs, maybe some pizza, see some cool, F-16s or something like that. And it was not that at all. It was like the opposite. We didn't even go into the base. We climbed a mountain and looked down on it. And the social studies teacher lectured to the kids about like what a detriment the base was, and all the terrible things that the accidents that happened, and the legal issues. And I was shocked because it was portraying, America and American military in a negative light, which is the first time, I had been exposed to that. So that really like started me thinking about like, peace education. And at first I was really strongly against it, but it did like start me thinking about like questioning my whole worldview, which I had developed, growing up in rural America in Western Kansas. So yeah, that was my first brush with peace education here. And then I left Japan and I went to Gaza. And then I went to grad school in the States, in DC, at American University, and studied peace and conflict resolution, international conflict resolution. And then I came back to Japan. And when I came back in 2005, like the peace education that I had met with in the late 90s was completely gone. And that's something that I wrote about for my thesis, for my master's thesis at Hiroshima City University. Like what happened to Hiroshima peace education? And that's an interesting story. I don't know how much you know about that.
No, can you give us a little summary? I haven't heard much about that. I mean, besides my kids going through it, I don't
Yeah,
really see it from the inside. I wasn't teaching peace education. I was teaching at university. We weren't
yeah,
doing it. It's really junior high and
yeah,
high school that do it, right?
yeah, yeah. Um, it's wild. Like a lot of that has changed so much since the 90s. Um, and now, like, this is my opinion, is like what you get is a lot of like watered down peace education. You know what I mean? It's like peace education that's just like, hey, everyone has their own idea of peace, and that's fine. Um, and that's really easy to do because no one can disagree with it. However, are you addressing like the real issues? Um, and you get really weird things like the G7, where you have it's in Hiroshima, it's about Hiroshima. Oh, and here's this arms deal that we're doing, you know, selling weapons and militarization. And a lot of people, like from the old school, are like, wait a minute, that's not Hiroshima. That's not what it's supposed to be about. Because the motto of Hiroshima is "Ayamachi o kurikaisuna." We would not repeat the mistake. You know, so I think that's really important. That first of all, we recognize like what was the mistake. You know, um, and if that gets like watered down, and if it gets to be something that like, oh, just it's all different opinions and everyone's has their own take on it, and that's fine, then like it's really hard to make sure that we recognize that A, it was a mistake, B, how did it happen, and C, what's happening right now that resembles that, if not exactly the same, but in the ways that are important.
Yeah. What I was working with a local media company when Obama came. And this is one of the stories I tell when I take people around Peace Park. And I was helping transcribe what he was saying so that they could add the Japanese subtitles. And it was a really amazing time to be a part of that project. And after that subtitle project was done, at the end, they kept asking me, did he apologize? And he
Hmm.
never said the word sorry, and that was very calculated. That would
Wow.
have been too political, right?
Mhm.
But he definitely was empathetic, and it was so important that a sitting US president came and hugged survivors and talked to them. um, Now you wrote to in the Chugoku Shimbun also talking about the wording, the translation of what is written on the cenotaph.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah,
tell about
yeah,
that a little bit? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. First of all, that's awesome that you did that. Um, what's written on the cenotaph is Yasuraka ni nemute kudasai, ayamachi o kurikaisanai kara, I believe, which means rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the mistake. Now, the official translation is rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the evil. That's the English translation. However, in Japanese, ayamachi, the word ayamachi, ayamachi o kurikaisanai, the wording is, it means mistake. So it was like, first of all, I was like, wait a minute, what? Because like, we all, like from our knowledge of Japanese, we know that ayamachi means mistake. Why is the official translation, we shall not repeat the evil? Now, first of all, I give all the respect to the person who came up with that, because that's what they wanted it to be. And I think that the quote unquote official translation comes from the actual person who made that. Um, at the same time, I am of the mind that I think it should be, we will not repeat the mistake, instead of we will not repeat the evil. The reason is that although I completely agree that what happened was evil, you know, um, however, when we categorize what happened as evil, we make it like far away. We make it like something that's distant from us, you know. Um, a mis- Mistakes are something that happen all the time. We all make some mistakes. To err is human, right? However, something that's evil, that's in a different category. And so my idea is that the important thing about remembrance when it comes to Hiroshima, or when it comes to Holocaust, or when it comes to anything, is, yes, being respectful and remembering the people who died and suffered at that time. How at the same time, and maybe even arguably more important, making sure that doesn't happen again. And I think that we should not repeat the mistake gives us that message, like, be careful, be careful. They didn't set out to do something evil. They were like, you guys ready to get evil? No, they were just going about their normal thing, and they were able to justify it, right? And people still justify it. Like, they're like, yeah, well, it's more complicated, and that word complicated is used to justify so many horrible things, you know. So like I like the translation of mistake, because I feel like it puts the onus a little bit more on us to look around, like, what are we doing? You know, we need to be careful and not to make that mistake, or not to go down that path.
I think that's really important. I appreciate your point of view, and I appreciate you writing it in Japanese and creating that important discussion that really should be happening. And that's another thing. I When you came to Hiroshima, just like when I first visited Hiroshima, the museum was very different. They had mannequins with hanging off skin and blood coming down, and it was really shocking. And I remember coming to Hiroshima as an American anyway with a heavy heart, and then seeing that and being shocked. But right next to me were the cutest little kids saying, hello, hello, are you American? Cool. And it was blowing my mind at that contrast. Now it has, the mannequins are gone, but there are people who say it should be shocking because it was shocking. It was horrible.
Mm.
um and but the fact that the museum, the narratives, there are people really working hard to make it fair and accurate and honest. And I do see that transition. And I think in that way, it does connect to peace education as well. And I appreciate being in Hiroshima where we have the opportunity to think about these things, right? And to have students thinking about these things. So you're right. Sometimes it's too clean or it's too abstract, it's too other. But in many ways, we're lucky to be here and have the chance to think about it, right?
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Now you had a recent NHK show featuring you and doing peace education. And one of the really amazing things they focused on in the show was how you were able to really connect your Japanese students with students in Gaza. In fact, you brought students over from Gaza to Japan. How did you do that? What an amazing chance to have that exchange for your students and for those students. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, actually, like I didn't bring them. I was just in the right place at the right time. Um, with they were coming to Japan on an UNRWA sponsored trip. And UNRWA, some people say UNRWA, I say UNRWA, some people say UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the UN agency that's responsible for supporting Palestinian refugees. So they were coming on a trip, and these were three kids chosen out of the millions of kids in Gaza to represent Gaza, to represent their people and their struggles to Japan in order to try to, get more funding and support for UNRWA. The reason that they came to my school is because I had an ongoing exchange with the kids in Gaza, just because that's something that's really important to me and something that I've always seen as a way that I can contribute, is to connect the kids that I teach now to the people that I knew and still have a great relationship with in Gaza. So we were super lucky. They came to my school in Takeda High School in Higashi, Hiroshima. And those kids, Fadi, Lama, Janan, are just amazing. They're just the most amazing kids, you know. And they just remind me of why I love Gaza so much, because it's just full of life and people who really, really value the things that are really, really important. Anyway, about connecting Gaza with Hiroshima, like I see that as the best thing that I can do as a teacher in my position. Like, I'm not like super duper smart, and I'm not like really good at, like writing and putting ideas together and like dealing with complex things. However, I do have friends over here and people that I communicate and I love over here. And I do have people over here that I'm connected with and that I love over here. And so, like, my idea is like maybe I can connect it. Maybe if I can just be a conduit between those two people, because it's not just something that I believe, but it's something that I've witnessed. And I do witness is that when you get people together, they want to connect. All you have to do is get them together and step back and get out of the way. And that's what I love seeing, is that magic moment when people feel that magic and that electricity of connecting together and recognizing the humanity in the other person. And I don't know what that is. I can't explain it. I'm definitely not responsible for it, but I do recognize it. And I feel on some level that that's the best thing I can do for peace.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Now, the story of these three young people from Gaza is really ongoing still. They weren't able to get back, right? And you did part of the NHK program, they showed how you did a presentation. Your students tried to take them away from their worries for a little while, doing a tour of Japan. But tell
Mm.
us a bit. But do you have any updates on what's going on with them?
So, I mean, anyone who deals with Palestine or is connected with Palestine knows that it's really good at one thing, and that thing is like just when you think it can't get any worse, it does, and that's so. It was so crazy because they came to our school, and these are kids that are like 14 years old, and one of them said, "I'm 14 years old. I've lived through 5 wars." And the very next day, number six started um, on October 7th. They were here at my school on October 6th. And so, therefore, they were not able to return home. I wish, honestly, that they had just stayed in Japan. They made it back to Jordan, and they've been in Jordan at refugee camp in Amman, Jordan, um, because there are not only Palestinian refugee camps in occupied Palestine territories, but also in neighboring countries, in Lebanon and Jordan, run by the same UN organization that sponsored their trip. So they have been in Amman, Jordan, since for about a half a year almost, and we have been continuing um, contact with them, and they have expressed a desire to come and study in Hiroshima. And so, like right now, I am like working with different people and talking to different people, and trying to hopefully make that a reality. That because like now all the schools in Gaza are destroyed. So as much as they want to be reunited with their families know that like what are the realistic possibilities for the future in Gaza. It's pretty dark. If they have an opportunity to study here in Japan, here in Hiroshima, then that is something that they want to pursue and have been, um, you know, have said that they wanted to do. So right now, I'm just trying to keep that connection and try to like connect them with more people that can hopefully make that happen.
Oh, that would be amazing. We know that Japan is very famous for accepting very few asylum seekers and immigrants. But you know, with your connections here and the fact that they've already been here. I love seeing that video you shared with me of him getting the bento and eating with the other kids, and it's just so heartwarming. And your students got to know them on a personal level. Hearing the response of your students and what they said, really deeply understanding that it really could be anyone. These are not others, these are friends,
Yeah.
these are real people. And I think that was one of your big targets for everything you do and talk about in peace education and in your work with school kids, right?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I've like nothing has made me happier than knowing that some of my students who met Janan and Fadi and Lama at that time still keep in contact with them. And some of them like graduated in April, and now they're in college, and I still hear that they still keep in contact with them. You know, and some of my students also were so moved by meeting them and seeing what happened on the news that they have been motivated to go down to Peace Park and join the candlelight vigil for the ceasefire that happens like every night in the Peace Park. So, like it's not a lot, it's not like, in the tens, but it's a few kids. And to me, when I see that, I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm doing something.
Can you tell us a little bit about the protest in front of the A-bomb dome? It's such an iconic, it's a UNESCO World Heritage site now since 1996. It's often the site that people commemorate the banning of nuclear weapons without consequence, right? They have a big memorial of that. Of course, August 6th, it's a concentrated area of protests, all kinds of protests. It really strikes me to see the Buddhist monks chanting and sitting there and beating a drum. And I asked them, what are they chanting about? And they said, we have to bring that positive energy from the center of the earth because we need it. Humanity needs it. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Whether you believe it or not, you're just
Yeah, no,
so
no.
grateful. People
Yeah.
are so passionate about the future of humanity and this world. It's a really powerful place to be.
Mm, 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 mm. Yeah. Yeah. People talk about the power of place. And that place there in Peace Park at the Atomic Bomb Dome, it has a lot of power. Um, it's a beautiful park. And at the same time, it shows the ugliness of human being, of humankind, of human nature. Us literally at our worst, arguably. Um, so the visual community, which has been going on shortly after the war started in November of last year, um, is an amazing community of people who give a hoot, and who see the connection between Hiroshima, what happened in Hiroshima, and what is happening in Gaza right now. No, it wasn't. They're not dropping atomic bombs. Uh, Depleted uranium, maybe, but not atomic bombs. No, it's not on the scale. And I, I keep saying that, but the amount of casualties keeps going up in Gaza. But in the way that dropping bombs on civilians, like in that respect, the connection. Um, and so I have been very blessed to be a part of that community. We've got people who work, with the World Friendship Center. Malachi, big tall dude. He's a real legendary dude. Rebecca, who is with me at Hiroshima City University, is just, an uber mensch. Um, and then a lot of really great, like, Japanese people who care, not just university professors, just like normal people, like musicians. We've got dudes that are completely tatted up, that are like there, and they really care, and they're pissed off. They're pissed off, you know. So it's like we don't all see eye to eye on literally everything, but we don't need to. The fact that you can be around people who care and who care enough to take time and to go down there and be down there and be in a community with them, yeah, it's really meaningful.
I sometimes see confrontations with the protesters. Have you had some very difficult but very important conversations with people who object to you being there and protesting, or contrary, support you guys and come out and talk to you about that?
It's wild. It's really wild. It's so wild because, like, in a 5 minute span, you'll get someone that be like, "You guys need to get out of here. You're disrespecting this space for your own, like, political agenda, and that's disgusting." And, like, really, like, just look at you and just like, like that. And, like, you're like, "Ouch," And then a few minutes later, someone will come up with tears in their eyes and just said, "Can I give you a hug? Thank you so much." And then you're like, "Whoa!" But it's so true. Like you really you just get the spectrum of the emotions and the reactions of people, and especially Peace Park. You're dealing with people from all over the world, including Israel and the United States. You know, and yeah, like for me, the messaging is really important. The words that you use, and you're like I stand for this, and like for me personally, I think it's really important to be clear that like what I'm standing for um, is not like a nationalist thing. It's not like a political thing. It's a human thing. You know what I mean? It's a human thing. Like we commemorate the victims of Hiroshima not because they were Japanese, but because they were human beings. And the same in Gaza, and the same in Israel. You know, it's that loss of human life which I want to object to and I want to raise hell about because I feel like we can't continue to justify it. And so I seek to connect with people, especially people with whom I don't agree with, like on that level, on that common denominator level, hopefully.
It's powerful. It's a powerful power. I can tell people about seeing the memorial every August 6th and coming many times over the many years that I've lived here. And there's always political speeches, there's always protesters. There's still, even 79 years after this year, there are still survivors who will give testimony. But really, it's when the elementary school kids talk about their vision of peace for the future, that really hits people hard because they're talking from such a place of innocence, usually, and they really believe it. And that's hard for us to hear because it's hard for us to believe that that would be possible, that peace or no nuclear weapons is possible. How do you feel? Are you feeling hopeful after, everything you've seen, everywhere you've lived? Do we have a chance for future peace, Ashley? Where are you at? Tough question.
Yeah. First of all, I totally agree with what you said about the children and the power of children. And that's because I feel like children have a way of like subverting ideology. Like adults look at other adults and are like, oh, you're this or you're that. And they put them into categories. And that's justification not to listen to them or to discount what they say. Kids are not like that. Kids can't be put into those categories. It's really, really hard to look at, um, you know, Anne Frank or like Hadashi no Gen from Hiroshima or these little kids and say discount their humanity. You just can't. It's really hard, and therefore, like I feel like that is a place or a way that hopefully we should be able to, realize that the justifications that we have for bombing these people or that people, don't hold water, because yes, they are humans, just like we are, and yeah, I mean, the, yeah, kids just have a way of cutting through the BS that we continue to tell ourselves to justify all of this militarism.
Isn't that crazy? It's like they see it in a more simple way. And why can't we do that? Why can't our common enemies like climate change and common enemies, like needing shelter, needing food, why can't that bring us all together, right? It seems simple when you're a kid. And is it you like people use the excuses complicated, but is it complicated? Don't we need to just prioritize, right? You must get that. And in NHK, the show they did it with your students, you had, this part where you're not trying to tell them how to think. You're presenting these ideas, and then how do the kids respond? And sometimes that just must lift your heart, how they respond with such clarity. That's the way it should be. You're right. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. When that student, she said like it's not worth it. I was actually like playing devil's advocate and talking about how why all the reasons why war was a good thing, because it's good for the economy, gets everyone together on the same page, and blah blah blah. Basically, all the things that nationalists and militarists use. And then the student said, "I don't. It's not worth it. If you're doing all that and people are dying and you're killing people, it's not worth it." So yeah, you know,
Yeah. Can you talk about this graphic a little bit? Do you use this in your classes?
I like I like to draw. I've always liked to draw. I'm not like super good at it, um, but I find that like sometimes pictures help me to say things that I can't like really articulate. And that is just a picture that I did, and I did it in pencils later because I feel like that's a little bit more expressive. But it's Anne Frank, and it's Hadashi no Gen, Barefoot Gen, who is the iconic character from the manga about a child who survived the atomic bombing here in Hiroshima. And then there is the Palestinian girl from Gaza, and she was, famously one of the many, many child victims of the war in Gaza. And in fact, the very girl that the protesters at Columbia University renamed the hall, like Hind Hall, like her name is Hind, um, and they renamed one of the buildings that they occupied Hind Hall after her. So, like, to me, if we can get to the place where we can look at Hadashi Gen, child victims of Hiroshima, um, and Frank, child victims of the Holocaust, and the kids that are now dying, like right now, like, yesterday, today, in Gaza, like, to me, like, that would be huge if we can just see the shared humanity there. It sounds like a super simple thing, but, you know, we have all these like justifications in our mind, and we're told that like, oh, for this reason this is different, this is not the same, you know what I mean? But when you look at those kids, you're like, how can you say that? you know it's not different for them, and it shouldn't be for us.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. Now we were started the conversation talking about pro wrestling. That was kind of a thing that you were balancing, like this funny, aggressive, athletic thing. You've retired.
Yeah.
What are you doing now? You still in good shape. I see your guns there. How do you get your enthusiasm out in different ways? Are you taking up theater or something?
Oh man, I try to put it into my research now, and into my teaching. It gives me energy for what I'm trying to do, trying to connect my students here in Hiroshima with the kids in Gaza, trying to like emphasize like the time is now. You know what I mean? Like we could talk about no more Hiroshimas. We talk about never again. Yeah, now is the time to do that, and that takes a lot of energy. And so yeah, I try to channel it um, into that, and I I find being a part of a community of other people who are upset by what's happening, it really helps. And right now, I'm working on my dissertation for a PhD at Hiroshima City University at the HPU, the Hiroshima Peace Institute. Um, and I'm doing it on Hadashi no Gen, on barefoot Gen, and specifically on the author of Barefoot Gen, Nakazawa Keiji. So, like, that Barefoot Gen is really an iconic manga, but I find that at the heart of it is anger, is a sense of anger at what happened, at the injustice that happened. And this character, Barefoot Gen, like, he's upset, he's pissed off. And so I kind of like vibe with that a little bit, like the pro wrestler in me, because he doesn't like use really, really complicated words or anything. But he recognizes, and his anger is directed specifically at the people who were responsible for starting the war, which is the military Japanese government, and the people who were responsible for dropping the bomb on Hiroshima. So putting those two parties together, I think that's really powerful because it breaks you out of thinking about like nation versus nation. You know what I mean? Like when we think in terms of nation, like, oh, you're American, Japanese, or whatever. Like Hadashi no Gen, he's shaking his fist at the militarists who started the war in Japan and the militarists who dropped the bomb on Hiroshima so callously from America. And like for me, when you connect the militarists, on the top, the people who are, yeah, we need to sell these weapons, we need to use these weapons, it's okay because blah, blah, blah. Then you also connect the people on the bottom, the people who are having the bombs dropped on them, and the people who are suffering because of all of their resources are going to the military and to militarism. So yeah, to me, that's powerful. And I put a lot of like emotional energy into that, and hopefully, I'll be able to amplify that voice.
Wow. I'd love to read it. Good luck with finishing it. And it sounds like you're giving talks about it, going around doing seminars as well. You did one recently in Seta, where you were based as a jet. Is that right? And a beautiful area, rural Hiroshima, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's a home for me. It's really a home for me. And getting back with the old people and those old mountains, yeah, very, very awesome.
And then you, at one of the protests recently, you talked about reading something from Martin Luther King Jr. and something that he talked about, the need to be guided by truth and love. That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
How do you
yeah.
keep your hope, not get too depressed by things continuing and things that seem overwhelming? How do you keep your focus on living a good life and doing what you can?
I mean, all I want to do is what I can do. I think that we're only responsible for the things that are under our control. And I think at any given time, it seems like we're at a crossroads or, you know, we're at the precipice. And it always seemed like that. I think if you go back in history, we always feel like we're at a crossroads or at the precipice. You know what I mean? That's the way human beings kind of process it. I don't look at it like that. I look at it more like an ongoing tug of war, and like which direction do you want to pull in? You know what I mean? And so I'm just trying to like put all the resources that I have and in my control into pulling in what I see as the right direction, and just believe, you know, like there's a great quote that I can't think of right now, but it's something like, you know, um, hold on, maybe I'll find it. Um, um, okay, but it's, you know, not by sight but by faith kind of thing, I think, and just believing that, you know, it will make a difference even if we don't see it, you know, and having fun.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing, Ashley, with all your work with education, peace education, writing your dissertation, and even with ProRes. I love your energy. I love all the positive things you're putting out there into the world. I'm grateful that you are also here in Hiroshima fighting the good fight. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've been watching your stuff for a long time, and now to be actually on it and doing it with you is a real honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everyone for watching. And of course, as always, if you have any questions or comments, please write them below. Ashley, how can people get more involved? Any advice for people at the end?
I think, you know, like being in community with people who share your values. You know what I mean? Find them. They're out there. Other people are not okay with what's going on, and if you find them, you can double your efforts and redouble your efforts and redouble your efforts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everyone, take care of yourself and think about taking care of others as well. Have a good night, folks. Take care. See you next time.